COVID-19 is hitting the travel and tourism industry very hard. Before the pandemic, just outside of Washington, D.C., here in Virginia, at Dallas Airport, traffic looked like this. Now it looks like this. A similar situation is happening across Africa in many parts, as international and local travel has been at a standstill for months now. People in the diaspora needing to travel straight or throughout the continent, Ethiopian Airlines, Africa's prominent air carrier, is likely your best bet. Hello, I am Auriane Itangishaka, and you are watching Our Voices. This week, we are looking at the transportation industry on the continent during this pandemic. We'll also look at the effect of travel restrictions on the tourism industry. I'll be discussing more about this while I'm in my home. Welcome. From Dallas Airport, I'm in the studio back in my home to further discuss the effect of COVID-19 on the transportation and tourism industries on the continent. Alexandre de Juniac, CEO of the International Air Transportation Association, says, "Stay strong, we will get through this crisis and keep the world connected." Though his organization says that Africa's network of airlines could take up to 3 years to rebound from the devastating impact of COVID-19 related travel restrictions, this global crisis has also allowed the battered industry to rethink and plan for new and different ways of doing things. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Johannesburg, South Africa.
Africa's airlines have been grounded for months as nations have shut their borders to try to stop the spread of coronavirus. Now, as countries prepare to reopen their skies, the airlines cannot simply pick up where they left off, industry experts say. Since March, the livelihoods of some 3.3 million people, not just pilots but engineers, mechanics, and support staff, have hung in the balance as air carriers saw their income shrivel and their future grow increasingly uncertain. It is, says the head of one of Africa's largest airline associations, a grim picture.
By the middle of April, you had scheduled air traffic down at 95% below what was the February 2020 levels. So the airlines had to go into a cash preservation system where they had to obviously conserve cash and look at ways of reducing costs. And one of the major areas where they obviously looked at reducing costs was in the area of, unfortunately, their employees.
Pilot Carl Bolweg knows that firsthand. Right before South Africa announced its national lockdown, the veteran pilot flew his last flight for South African Airways domestic service. At 58, he says he's made peace with the fact that his long career ended that day with a whimper.
It was on the 15th of March. Actually, I didn't know that it would have been my last flight.
And where did you go?
Oh, I can't remember now. I was hoping you wouldn't ask that question. I think it was... I'll have to check in my logbook.
But Zweigenthal says this could be a chance for the industry to make beneficial changes. Some airlines, he says, like continental leader Ethiopian Airlines, have converted passenger planes into cargo aircraft to meet the continent's continuing demand for goods because of a lack of transport infrastructure on the ground. Across the industry, he says, airlines are looking at how to build a diverse workforce. And he says, in coming months, passengers should expect to be courted by airlines as they try to win them back.
There's got to be a lot of marketing and convincing of the passengers that it is safe to fly and healthy to fly. And obviously, from that perspective, you will see initially quite a lot of low fares in the market.
He predicts that in South Africa, domestic travel will rebound by mid-2021. International travel will take longer, until 2023 or even 2024. But waiting in the wings are a new, hopeful group of staff, like 28-year-old flight instructor Kelly Slingers.
I think we're a very adaptable industry. If you look at 9/11, I think there's a lot of undecidedness right now. People are scared. But in the wake of 9/11, the industry came back. It took a couple of years for it to recover. And I think that's exactly what will happen to the aviation industry. We will recover.
And when it does, she says, the sky is the limit. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Now, while at Dallas Airport, I was able to speak to Nugusu Worku, the Ethiopian Airlines U.S. Director of Operation, and began by asking him how Ethiopian Airlines has been able to stay afloat even operating a daily departure from the Washington, D.C. region during these tough economic times when many of the competitors are laying off thousands of their employees.
One is a business model itself. We have diversified aviation business model, which is Ethiopian has now 7 strategic business units. Like one is international passenger business, domestic business, cargo, MRO, ground handling. These are in their own merit strategic business units. And of course we have aviation academy also. So when the passenger business was affected due to COVID, we started focusing on cargo. So that's one of the reasons we survived the challenge. But the second reason is agile leadership. You know, our leadership so agile that they took right steps at the right time. So we, instead of panic mode, and we decided to convert our passenger fleet into cargo. The profit margin of airlines in good times is 4%. Yeah, to put it in context, IT industry, technology, gets a profit margin up to 40%. So the only way to survive in the industry is you have to manage cost. And you have to also, of course, enhance revenue streams. So, but we have a cost leadership strategy in which we manage our unit cost. And that's also one of the success factors of Ethiopian Airlines. Initially, when the situation happened in March, April, May, there was panic by many passengers. So our operation, passenger operation, came down to 10%. And then in those times, we had lots of cargo, PPE, so we helped the situation with lots of revenue from cargo. But of late, we are witnessing a recovery in our passenger business. So we are actually seeing more passengers. So we are actually coming to a new normal. The third reason, a strong, dedicated, and committed workforce. I would say these are the reasons for the success of Ethiopian Airlines in this challenging time.
As you've said, they've changed your fleets from passengers to cargo, and you flew to about 80 countries, even at the beginning of COVID. Is that strategy still in place right now?
Yes, of course. We believe people are now learning how to live with COVID. It's not like the situation in March where there was lots of panic, but now people are taking cautions and learning. So we see people traveling. For example, today we have around 220 passengers going to Africa, so which is a very good load factor for such flights. In fact, now focusing on the passenger business also, because there is a strong recovery. People are now traveling in large numbers. So yeah, still we are working on our strategies.
And a few weeks ago, you completed your expansion at Addis Ababa International Airport.
Exactly.
With all that expansion and still wanting to stay profitable and a prominent airline on the continent.
Yeah.
Have you been spending more resources perhaps to convince people that it is still safe to continue to travel?
We have a 15 years long plan. So that's one of the reasons we had expansion project at Addis Ababa Airport. And in terms of safety, in this COVID time, air travel, I tell you, is still the safest means of travel. And in fact, according to a recent Harvard study, air travel is safer than having a meal at a restaurant or buying grocery items. So, regarding the measures we are taking at our hub, Addis, or at all points of Ethiopian Airlines, we require employees and passengers to wear masks always, at all times. We avail sanitizers. We deep clean our aircraft. We sanitize. We disinfect. So all these measures are really assuring safety of our flights, both during the flight and in our hub at this Ababa Airport.
For those who are traveling from here to the U.S., what is the first thing they should know before even booking a flight to the continent? What is the first thing they should do before booking a flight during this pandemic?
I would say they should check their destination's country's policy. For example, Ethiopia requires any passenger to produce a COVID negative certificate. So, for example, it's not for transit passengers. For anybody traveling into, for example, Ethiopia, should have a PCR, a COVID negative certificate. We require that. Likewise, rest of African countries or other countries have their own policies. And of course, they should avail their PPEs, like masks, sanitizers, and things like that. But we also avail during the flight sanitizers to our passengers.
Mr. Workhoop, from what other cities are the diaspora able to travel from the U.S. straight to the continent at the moment in this pandemic with AT?
Now we are currently flying from Washington, Dallas, this airport, daily. And we also fly from New York. We also fly from Chicago. So we are transporting passengers without any disruption, connecting people to Africa and the rest of the world.
Now, on October 21st, the International Air Transportation Association announced that 4 other African airlines had ceased operation: Rwanda, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, and Burkina Faso, who have pledged a total of $311 million in direct financial support to air transportation. It's time to take a short break. Be sure to join us on our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our handle is @VOA Our Voices. You can also reach us on WhatsApp. Our number is right there on your screen. After the break, we'll take a look at efforts to curb COVID-19 through the ground transportation like matatus and bodas. We'll be right back.
Being part of Our Voices is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them
and bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.
Welcome back. You're watching Our Voices. This week, we are looking in depth at the state of the transportation and tourism industry and the measures being taken to keep people safe from coronavirus on their travel journeys. In many parts of the world, the fastest way to get around town for city dwellers is on a motorcycle. And that's the way it is in Africa. I use this mode of transportation in different cities on the continent. However, with this kind of transportation, social distancing is just impossible. In fact, you're encouraged to hang on tight to a person as much as you can. Yes, I'm talking about a boda as it is called in Uganda. An innovator there has come up with a plastic shield to protect both the driver and the passenger. Hilma Athumiani tells us more from Uganda.
Uganda has hundreds of thousands of motorcycles on its roads, and the majority of them work as taxis, known as bodas. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, since April, the government has banned motorcycle taxis because of the close proximity between the driver and passenger. To solve that problem, Dixon Journey created a plastic shield to mount between them.
We believe the shield is entirely going to protect the passenger from getting contaminations on the road in the process of moving. Number 2, he will not get direct contact with the rider.
4 months into Uganda's lockdown, boda drivers allowed only to deliver goods are struggling to make a living. Drivers are urging authorities to let them take passengers if they use the shield.
This shield, we all as boda riders should use it because I see there's a distance. If I'm seated here and the passenger is at the back, I don't see how we're going to get infected by COVID-19.
Uganda's Ministry of Works and Transport says they are investigating the effectiveness of the shield. Chief Engineer Tony Kavuma says one concern is that passengers will wrongly believe the shield is all they need for protection.
That is the use of the masks and the helmet, a fully covered helmet. Because that one, it shields the rider. If in case he or she is infected, they'll be able to contain the droplets. That's number one. Two, it will, in case of a fall, it will also protect the head.
It is not clear when Ugandan authorities will allow passengers back onto border borders. Meanwhile, Hirari says they are manufacturing more shields in anticipation of high demand. Halima Athmani for VOA News, Kampala.
Now, as South Africa continues to ease the coronavirus restrictions, technical experts and public health experts are working on plans to protect the health of 14 million South Africans who rely on a complex network of regular minibus taxis to get to work, school, and more. VOA's Anita Pau reports from Johannesburg, South Africa.
The humble minibus taxi is a lifeline for more than 70% of South Africa's workforce. But health experts worry this system is a breeding ground for coronavirus because of riders' close quarters and the high volume of passengers. A new South African nonprofit initiative, led by a businessman who is also the eldest son of President Cyril Ramaphosa, is trying to address this gap.
When we insisted as business and as South Africans, let's open this economy, by not dealing with the commute, we basically undid what was happening with lockdown. So if you deal with the transport sector, because COVID is a virus that moves through the transport sector, if you deal with that effectively, you could actually put in an artificial lockdown.
HIV researcher Dr. Jenny Pfeiffer-Kutsia, founder and director of the African Potential Foundation, says her team has come up with several solutions, ranging from simple to complex.
What we're looking at is a system very similar to what's being used in ambulances, and that is to adapt a UVC air filter that allows the airflow to be encouraged within the taxi using various fans within the filter, and air passes through the filter where it's then irradiated within a matter of seconds and is then transferred back out into the taxi to be circulated out within the taxi.
Her team is also considering an alarm system that alerts passengers to open the windows to allow fresh air to circulate, at sanitizing stations that passengers can use to clean their hands before boarding, and at a divider between the driver and passenger. That last intervention, says Ramaphosa's business partner Brad Fisher, is especially crucial. He says the government's efforts at sanitizing taxis only work up to a point.
But you can spray this rank to death. Unless you get into the taxi, where there's a closed environment, it's a capsule with whatever it is, whether there's 3 or 10 people's academic, that driver gets sick, and statistically, the driver's seeing 2,000 people a month, he's going to get sick.
One of these measures, say Ramaphosa's team, could decrease the risk of infection by up to 80%. So far, SDI has fitted out 5,000 school transport taxis and 1,000 commuter taxis at an estimated cost of about $340,000, which works out to about $60 per vehicle, much of it provided by donors.
It's been quite a journey of discovery for us non-scientists to bring all these people together with one thing in mind. We need our people to get to work safely, and we need to save lives.
Pfeiffer-Kutsia says the team is also looking at how to scale the model to fit other African countries, which use similar transport systems to move millions of people each day. Anita Pau, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Now it's time for another quick break. When we return, we'll look at tourism and how it is being affected and how both the industry and people who depend on it are coping economically. We'll also look at how people who are satisfying the need to travel in the safest way they can during this pandemic. We even have a story about people traveling to nowhere. You don't want to miss this. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Our Voices, the tourism industry and how it is being affected, and how both the industry and people who depend on it are coping economically. Now, an African Union study reveals that the COVID-19 pandemic could cost Africa $500 billion of damage to the tourism and aviation sector. For example, an annual great migration of wildlife across Tanzania and Kenya usually attracts thousands of tourists on safaris, bringing income to traders that depend on them, such as souvenir makers. Lenny Luwaga reports.
Kenya's Masai Mara National Reserve normally has almost as many tourists as wildebeests for the annual Great Migration of wildlife from Tanzania. But tourism is struggling to recover after authorities lifted March COVID-19 local travel restrictions in July and international ones just this month.
In the last 6 months, we have lost almost $800 million in terms of revenue for the government. Definitely, we were expecting to have $2 billion revenue for the government from tourism, but because of the pandemic, that's a big loss.
But with just a trickle of tourists, many of Kenya's souvenir sellers remain closed and the craftsmen and women are struggling to make a living. Nolta Parry Kisemei heads a group of 3,000 beadwork artists, all of them women. They've seen their incomes drop to a fraction of the $100 per month average they and their families depend on.
As a leader of the women in this area, most, if not all, have been expecting answers from me on how to survive the pandemic. I am totally disoriented and helpless on what to tell them and how to weather this storm.
To help the craftswomen to get by, local aid groups have been donating food.
When they are also not skilled, to have alternatives in life. You know, people who have not gone to school, they are very much limited. So if one door is closed, then they have no other way to pursue other opportunities.
NAROK authorities say they are also providing food to around 800 families in their area.
We had even to go and feed those communities which are living around the game reserve because they are heavily affected by the loss of business in this game reserve.
Kenya's safari tourism is slowly recovering. Meanwhile, locals are holding on, hoping one day soon the herds of tourists will again rival the wildlife. Lenny Luwaga for VOA News, Narok, Kenya.
Now, across the globe, international travel is almost non-existent as many people try to avoid being infected by COVID-19. The hustle of airport check-in delays is also not welcoming to many travelers. The global tourism industry is left to find new streams of revenues. In Asia, companies are trying to stay profitable through so-called flights to nowhere. VOA's Bill Gallo explained from South Korea.
Like most of the world's airports, South Korea's normally packed Incheon Airport has sat mostly empty for months. But some airlines in Asia are trying to change that by offering flights that end up right where they began. It's the flight to nowhere. While it may sound like a gimmick, customers are actually buying tickets. This Taiwanese airline took passengers to South Korea's Jeju Island, circled a few times, and flew right back to Taiwan. In the air, passengers had a Korean language and culture lesson.
Because I couldn't go abroad, my friend recommended this event. I found it on the internet. I felt it was very unique. I wanted to experience a flight to nowhere.
The flights aren't cheap. Australia's Qantas airline charged almost $800 for an economy seat on a flight that offered views of attractions such as the Great Barrier Reef. The flight sold out in 10 minutes. In Japan, the flights don't even leave the ground. This entertainment company offers flights in a fake airport cabin. Passengers get meals and tour famous sites through virtual reality headsets.
We've been changing and trying to improve every day, so I hope it will last for a long time in the long run.
The trend is a sign people are eager to be done with quarantine and other restrictions.
But the problem is, if you want to travel to other countries, you have to go through all the safety procedures. You have to have your COVID-19 tested, and you need to go through quarantines. And it's really not convenient for a lot of people just for traveling for now.
But while the flights to nowhere may provide a boost for travel companies, they don't help the broader tourist industry. Here in Seoul, many shopping districts that rely on foreigners are mostly empty, waiting for the flood of tourist dollars that may not come anytime soon. Bill Gallo, VOA News, Seoul.
It's time to wrap up our show, but first, let's go back to the continent where it's not all doom and gloom for some women venturing into the transportation industry. Ghana's women-only trucking company Ladybird Logistics has watched its fleet of trucks quadruple just in 2 years as the number of its drivers triple despite the current pandemic. Stacey Knock reports from Ghana.
Eyram Sedor is proud to be one of the first women to join Ladybird Logistics, a trucking firm in Ghana that claims to be the world's first to hire only female drivers. She also loves seeing newly recruited ladies get behind the wheel.
The company is developing, because we start with 11 drivers. We are the first batch, and now everything is improving well, more drivers are coming, more cars are coming.
Since starting in 2017, the company has grown from 5 trucks in 2018 to 20 trucks today, with 35 women drivers and 14 more in training. While some of Ghana's male truckers encourage them, the company says others don't want to see women in the profession.
The guys thought this wouldn't be possible. And they were thinking maybe the trucks, the women will be smashing the trucks here and there. But 3 years down the line, we are still going and we are growing.
Ladybird drivers say the work is empowering and shows the importance of giving women equal opportunities.
You can't recruit only men. We've got families to feed. And what if my husband is the only person who brings income and then he's sick? So I bring income, he also brings income. It helps the society, it helps the country. Women take care. When you educate a woman, you educate a country.
S&M Nyairo has been pushing Ghana's women to get into commercial driving. She started out in Accra as a taxi driver, also a job dominated by men. Now she trains women to drive trucks and buses and has seen increasing support from Ghanaian men.
When you have fathers, brothers, uncles talking to you and asking how they could get their nieces, their daughters and their grandchildren into the profession, it tells you society has been listening.
Nyairo and Ladybird Logistics say they will continue steering more women into the profession. Stacey Knott for VOA News, Takoradi, Ghana.
What a beautiful story. And that's all for us this week. And thank you for watching. On behalf of my co-hosts Haiti Adams-Fitzpatrick and Ayan Bior, I am Auriane Itangishaka. Thank you for watching. Good day.